ADHD reWired, episode 402. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHD rewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, you can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back with another episode of ADHD reWired. We are here for our monthly live Q&A with everyone here from the ADHD reWired family. We first got MJ from ADHD Diversified. What's going on, MJ?
Not a whole lot, but it's good to be here.
It's good to see you. We have Coach Roxy Martin from the soon-to-be launched, eventually one of these days, podcast. Wait, what was the question?
Well, hello.
Well, hello. And of course, we have Will Kerr from Hacking Your ADHD and the co-host of the soon-to-be launched one day eventually. Wait, what was the question?
Who's got two thumbs and is unmedicated today? This guy.
Oh boy, this should be fun. We have Coach Moira Maven from the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle. How's it going, Moira?
I'm surviving. Happy to be here.
All right. And we got Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials Pandemic Survivor.
Yay. How are you, Mr. Tivers?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for asking. And we have Barb McDonough, ADHD reWired's executive extraordinaire, helping keep everything moving here at ADHD reWired. How you doing, Barb?
Doing all right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. Okay, so while we are recording this, it is ADHD Awareness Month. So for everyone who is here, glad that you are joining us for this. And everyone who's hearing this on the podcast, how was your ADHD Awareness Month? Let's start with, I think it's Nicolasa. Let me know how I did with the pronunciation of that name. And what's your question?
That presentation was great because you tried. I mean, how you said it was good.
Because I tried. I love it. I just got an A for effort. But how do you actually pronounce your name?
You said it right. It's just more emphasis. Nicolasa.
Nicolasa.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So what's your question?
My question was, how do you deal with feedback from bosses that you don't want to tell either way, but also, that don't know your diagnosis?
Okay. So you're saying that you're getting feedback from your bosses that are ADHD related, and you're not wanting to disclose that the reason that you're maybe struggling with certain things on the job is because of the ADHD?
Yeah, in the sense that maybe I know part of it is that I'm sensitive, but I also know the other part is the lack of acceptance for other, modes of communication or work styles. So while I'm not ready to disclose, I also feel like, me coming up with suggestions like less staff meetings, and that being like, well, that's not, we all have to meet and we all have to, brainstorm. So just stuff like that, where then I come off maybe as not a team player. Like that's some feedback I get. And it's just like how either regardless of what my boss says, how like internally do I deal with that feedback like that or other feedback?
Well, let me ask this. Is the feedback that you're receiving, would you say it has validity to it?
I would have said that like a couple years ago, but after, I feel like the last couple of years, we've all gotten to a space where, or at least some of us have gotten to a space where we can say, just because we've always done that, just because we've had 3-hour staff meetings every week at work, doesn't mean that's necessarily what's best for the company.
Okay. And what do you do?
I lead a fundraising campaign for city nonprofits or for nonprofits in our city.
Okay, great. And you've been there for a number of years, it sounds like.
No, I change jobs about every 18 months.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I've been here for about 18 months.
Okay. Is when you're receiving feedback, is it like on the fly, or is it more structured? Is it part of the culture of the organization?
It's more on the fly. So we don't have like formal employee reviews, or it'll be like, I'm in marketing, so I'll design something and we'll have a staff meeting and everybody will go around and like give feedback on my design. And it's just like, I didn't really want your feedback, but they all want to like collaborate. So it's just like, how can I not be depressed for 3 days after a staff meeting where everybody has to like feel like they need to chime in?
Well, let me ask you this. How important do you feel it is as an expectation for you to integrate the feedback you're getting on, say, a design that you made?
I don't.
Okay. I'm curious as to what might happen if you started sort of from the position of this feedback actually might be valuable, sort of like um, putting ego aside.
Yeah.
Because I know that could be hard when you work on something and someone's giving you feedback about something that you've produced, right? That's a very vulnerable thing to do. But one of the things I'm wondering is, do you feel invested in the overall goals of the organization, or do you feel that you're there trying to do your work and everyone else is kind of doing their work? Like how would you say you feel on those two sides?
I think that, so this is my story, is that my brain works differently than other people. And I think more creatively and approach things differently.
Hmm.
And so people in the community appreciate the results. But then when they work with me directly and they realize, like, oh, wow, she's kind of unusual. This is really hard to work with. Then they try to like conform me into their like linear box. And then it feels so discouraging to again have to like go to another workplace where where they're like, oh, we really want to work with you. You're so creative. We love what you do in the community. And then you're, at the meeting and they're like, oh, this is really crazy. This is weird. This isn't what we're used to. And so I just never feel like they get to know me or try to like understand how I think. And yeah, maybe it's not like how you all think, or I'm not able to explain how I came up with this concept, but obviously it's worked if I have that reputation in the community. It's just like from the outside, it's okay. But then when they're directly with me,
Hmm.
it changes. And so that's hard.
Mm. I'm wondering if I could ask our coaches to chime in with any thoughts or ideas about this. Moira, go ahead.
I'm going back to what you originally were talking about, how to navigate. I mean, because ideally what it sounds like, you want to be able to get your needs met in this environment at the same time as helping there be some understanding of how you work. And without disclosing ADHD, sometimes what we can do is describe how we work best, as opposed to like, I get you, like a 3-hour staff meeting once a week. Oh my God, stick a fork in my eye. One of the reasons why I'm doing this now, as opposed to continuing to teach, is because I finally realized that the box that I was trying to create for myself in that system wasn't going to exist. But going to the people around you and letting them know how to get the best out of you, right? So it's in their best interest as well. And as far as like the staff meeting and the people commenting on it, with some things, we might be able to say, I'm sharing with you this for you as information. I may not be looking for, or even just saying, I'm sharing this with you for information. If you have feedback for me, can we please arrange a time or a way, right? So it's less, like it's, so you're not saying, no, you don't want to hear anything.
Mm,
But it's in a way that works better for you.
right.
And give a reason, like, I want to be able to give you my full attention. I want to be able to have some time to think about what was said at the meeting besides this, like whatever. And that part, only really has to be kind of like a grain of the truth in my mind, right? Because what you're trying to do is shape the culture and the interaction around you to have it work better for you.
Do you know how you work best and like how you receive feedback that is best for you?
No, I haven't figured yet how to receive feedback that's the best for me. I think it's partially that thing where like if you're gonna work in a work environment, you just have to learn how to grin and bear it. And no, traditional workplaces are not like the end all be all, and you should try to change the culture, but that's a high expectation to put on myself.
Have you ever considered self-employment?
Self what?
Self-employment, working for
Yeah, I
yourself?
think I'm gonna have to, because I'm 43, and so changing jobs every 18 months isn't gonna work.
Yeah. No, and I do think exploring on how you best receive feedback is really going to be valuable for you. Because I think what Moira was saying is about being able to communicate what you need. You got to first know what you need in order to communicate kind of what you need, right?
Yeah.
Because I really believe that feedback is the sort of the genesis of growth, and there's two ways to receive feedback. One is when we actually ask for it, and we ask for it in an explicit way that is going to be helpful for us. And the other is when we received it and it wasn't necessarily asked for, right? And so, but we have choices on how we respond to the feedback we get in both scenarios. There is a model that I would encourage you to do a Google search on. It's called the Johari's window, and it's a model about self awareness and has to do with feedback, right? So we all have blind spots, every one of us, including and the people who think they don't usually have bigger ones, right? So this concept of the Johari's window is like there are things that are known to yourself and to others. There are things that are known to just yourself, but not others. There are things that are known to others, but not yourself, and that's your blind spot, right? And
Hmm.
then there's the things that aren't known to yourself or others, which may be like untapped talents and things like that. So this idea of Johari's window, I say it's a pane, like play on words, pane, window pane, actual pane, when you break through one of those blind spots. But that pane, from my personal experience, has always been worth it, like tenfold or 100-fold on whatever that like, oh crap, I didn't realize that I was doing that, or oh, I didn't realize I was actually struggling with that.
Right.
While that may hurt the ego momentarily, if you can sort of like say, okay, like that is what that is, and then commit to working on that, right? What you gain from that is so valuable that you will start looking for glass panes to crash through.
And how do you spell that?
So it's Johari.
Okay.
And I've seen some cool online assessments that will actually ask you to so you send it to people and it will first indicate like what you think your traits and strengths are, and then you send it to other people and see if they sort of say the same things that from what your perception is of what they think it is. Brendan, and then let's go to our next question.
Thank you.
You bet.
Oh.
Yeah, I've just a couple quick thoughts. One is if you're getting like, let's call it guerrilla feedback, right? Because there's no structure to it. You don't know when it's coming. It's just all of a sudden it's there. That's a recipe for you to have a pretty strong emotional response to that feedback before you can get to having a cognitive perspective and like think about it, right? And I'm thinking about my wife at the moment, because my wife, anytime I don't want to say spring something on her, but anytime I present her with an option that she is not expecting, she just says no. It's the answer is gonna be no, and then I have to wait a little while and like maybe bring it up again if it's something that I really care about, right? And it's completely an emotional response. It's an anxiety response as much as anything else. Because if I say, no, I don't have to worry about whatever that thing is that Brendan wants, I can just shoot that idea down and things will stay the way they are, which feels safer, right? So some of that, something like that might be happening for you when you get this feedback that is unanticipated and not necessarily even in context. As opposed to if you can get your boss to give you feedback in more of a structured environment where it's like, we're going to have a feedback session and you can prep yourself for it. The trick is in that case, you have to prep yourself for it. It can't be a situation where you're just going to worry about it for the next 2 hours until the meeting happens and then go in that much more keyed up. You have to be sort of doing some self-talk around, I'm going to listen to what they have to say, and maybe this thing will come up, maybe that thing will come up. It could be valid. Let me consider these things in advance, that sort of a thing. Another piece that is something I've been playing with lately through the lens of parenting, but I think applies here too, is I've been playing recently with the idea of what if we lived our lives as though we're not the main character, right? And this helps me a ton. I do this all the time. If my kid is upset and I'm the main character, I care about how my kid being upset is affecting me. If my boss is concerned with my performance at work and I assume that I'm the main character, I care about how him not liking my performance at work affects me. But if I operate under the assumption that I'm a supporting character, now when my kid is upset, they're the main character. I'm not the main character. So I can listen to what they have to say and address it and handle it in a little bit of a detached, sort of open way where I'm able to dodge some of the emotional response that comes with it. Not all of it, but some of it. And that might work well at work as too, right? Like if someone comes by and says, hey, I'm concerned about this, and this about your performance here. If I'm the main character, then this is a conflict, right? But if I assume that, I don't know, the business is the main character, maybe in this example, then it's like, okay, I'm not supporting the main character. I'm not supporting the business in the way that I maybe want to be or ought to be. How can I adjust what I'm doing so that I'm supporting the main character more effectively?
I freaking love that, Brendan. That is fantastic.
Thanks.
So good. By the way, tell Amy that I relate to her response of stuff being sprung on. All right, we have another question, and it is from Heather. How you doing, Heather?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. What is your question?
So I think my question, and I appreciate all your podcasts. I think I've listened to all of them.
Wonderful.
I am the neurotypical in my relationship. My husband is now a stay-at-home dad and homeschooling our kids. And I wonder, what is it that I can do best to support him to make him feel productive and useful being a stay-at-home dad?
Have you asked him?
I've tried.
Okay. So
I get a lot of I don't know, and my usual responses aren't ADHD compliant. I want to make a list and check a list, and I feel good about that, and that does not work.
if we kind of piggyback off our last listener's question about feedback, how open are you to feedback?
I hope that I'm very open. I want to help him in any way possible. I just need to know how.
Okay. So if he is not able to express what would be helpful, I think having a sort of an understanding and an agreement of sort of real-time feedback of what feels good and what doesn't, and maybe even checking in when you're trying maybe different ways to support him, and asking like, how did that land with you, right? Like I remember when I was starting my business, and this was new home. This was some 10 years ago, and my ex was getting ready to. I think we just had our son, or maybe a little bit before. But she was home while I was kind of working on starting my business, and this came up a lot. Like where she would like come into my office, and like if I'm in the middle of like a multi-part thought, and she entered the room, like all those thoughts were now gone. And it was so frustrating. Right. And so if like I had showed with her that I was intending on working on something, and she kind of popped into my office and saw that I might have been working on something other than what I told her was going to be working on, having her ask me those kind of open-ended questions about, or like asking the questions that are more like, are you working on what you want to be doing right now? And if no, it's like, do you need any help or support shifting? Like, yes or no. Like, do you want me to come back in 5 minutes? Yes or no. Like, so making it kind of easy, like, so you're not being sort of forced into anything, to sort of receive that help. But you also want to really make sure you're not getting into any kind of codependency, because that can happen. What I think one of the things that I learned from my marriage, which ended earlier this year, was what I think I viewed at one point, and for really most of the marriage, as being supported. Really, kind of in hindsight, was kind of enabling and some codependence. And so it's like, yeah, it's great when, the partner can do these other things, but it's like, but I think there's also this like unspoken feeling that I think a lot of people with ADHD have in this scenario, that they want to be held to high standards, right? If you're sort of given the out for things that might be hard for the executive functions, like, I mean, at least for me, like, I often took the out, but then I felt bad about taking the out. So I think that, like, really having this ongoing conversation with him, and even asking him like questions like, so he says he doesn't know. Here's a good coaching question you can ask him. Imagine you did know. What would that look like? How do you anticipate him responding to that?
I don't know. It's usually he knows good when he sees it, but not necessarily how to tell me what works for him ahead of time. And since this is a totally new situation
Mhm.
for us, I don't know. I can ask him.
And maybe having some kind of cue in the environment where you guys are interacting often, that sort of cues him to give you the feedback on when you're doing things that he finds helpful and valuable.
What do you mean cute?
Something like a question that's on like a whiteboard, or a sticky note, or something that says like, how are my questions, or how am I supporting you? Something like that, something you guys can come up with. Brendan?
As a stay-at-home dad, right? As a guy who's been a stay-at-home dad, one thing you can do to help him is have him listen to this episode, because I might say some stuff that is true for him that he is not ready to say out loud yet, and this might make it easier. When I was a stay-at-home dad, the question specifically is, my husband is a stay-at-home dad with super ADHD. What's the best thing I can do to help him feel productive during the day? Uh, I did not define productivity as anything I did at home. I defined productivity solely as what I did as a salary earner, as a worker in the productivity side of capitalism and having a job. And I didn't, because I was a stay at home dad. And part of that is deeply ingrained in gender identity and the role that men have historically played in the family. So pivoting and flipping that gender roles on their head is not insignificant, and he might be challenged by that. I know that I was, despite the fact that my wife has pretty much always earned more money than I'd have. I also didn't feel productive because I didn't have a job. I felt like I didn't have a job because of my ADHD, right? Like, I don't have a job because I'm a failure. And this is like the booby prize, is I get to be the stay at home dad, which was weird because I loved being a stay at home dad and I'm really good at it. Like, that's what I do for a living now, is teach people how to parent. So I did a lot with that. It really informed a lot of what I do now. But I don't want to pretend that I didn't have a lot of self identity and self worth challenges happen because I wasn't working anymore. And I wasn't working anymore because my ADHD caused me to fail at my chosen career, which may or may not be applying to your husband, but I don't want to ignore that piece that might be in here somewhere. Also, sticking with gender stuff, men are not historically expected to be phenomenal at home. And so they're not necessarily taught what to do. He might be going into stay at home dadding, not really knowing what that means, like not understanding, what does the cleaning look like? What is the parenting supposed to look like? These might be expectations that have never been placed upon him. And so he might need to have some help with that. And probably it's going to be extra hard if that's coming from you, because when my wife was giving me help, I often felt worse about my mistakes because she was the breadwinner, because I failed at being the breadwinner. And 1950s America says that I should be the breadwinner. And there's something wrong with me as a man because I wasn't. Now, I know I'm doing kind of a deep dive here on myself and potentially any other stay at home dad on the planet, or at least in America. But it's important stuff to just know. It might be there under the surface, and you might wind up getting some conflicts that you're not expecting. that are probably not about whatever the conflict is about. It's probably some self-worth stuff happening. So for whatever that's worth, I wanted to kind of throw it out there.
Thanks, Brendan. All right, Coach Rexy Martin, and then we're going to take a quick break.
Brendan already touched on it, but I was wondering about the expectations and if that was a conversation that you and your husband had, if you guys were clear on sort of what you wanted it to look like on any given day. And so that was my first question. And then my thought around that was, if you guys had kind of a loose idea of what it is, what a Monday or a Wednesday might look like, then at least you have something kind of objective to talk about if it's not playing out. And then it could be not on you to decide, how to do it or how to support your husband in doing it, but at least it could be a conversation like, okay, that's not working for you. What do you want to do about it? What might be helpful? What resources might be available? Where would you look? Something that kind of gets the conversation going and that curiosity piece sort of engaged and active without it being accusatory or bringing up defensiveness.
Yeah, and an expert in this domain is Melissa Orlov, and she has some really good stuff on marriage and ADHD. So I would encourage you to check that out. But we're going to take a quick break right now, and we have more questions queued up for you when we come back. So we will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from our coaching community. We're just over the halfway point for our 26th season of coaching and accountability groups, and we are already starting to fill up spots for our winter season starting in January 2022. Here at ADHD reWired, the mission of our coaching groups is to empower our members and create a safe and supportive environment that's shame-free so they can learn effective ADHD ways to live a more productive and wholehearted life. Put simply, we believe in growth through community. And that mission doesn't stop at 10 weeks. The support continues in our alumni membership community, our weekly alumni coaching and planning sessions, and all of our alumni-only events and more. If there's anything we can promise you, it's that you're still going to have ADHD at the end of the 10 weeks, which is why the alumni membership community was built, so members don't have to continue their growth around their ADHD alone. Because managing ADHD isn't just about the tools and skills. It really is about connection, community, and being around people who just get it. Kick off the new year by joining our winter coaching season starting in January 2022 by going to coachingrewired.com and add your name to our winter interest list. Once you get your name added to our interest list, keep an eye out for your email for instructions on how you can join us for our next registration event on Thursday, December 2nd at 10 a.m. Central. That is 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. Registration is by invitation only. So if you don't want to miss your chance to join us starting on January 7th for our 27th season of coaching and accountability groups, go now to coachingrewired.com and click on the big yellow button to add your name to our interest list. Then you'll receive an email with a few things we'll need from you before you get your actual invitation. This includes watching a 30-minute pre-recorded video, then sending us a 45-second video. Don't worry, getting your name added to our interest list means we'll send you the directions of what you need to do when you add your name to that list at coachingrewired.com. And since I am recording this before our second registration event, I'm not sure how many spots we'll have left, so it is possible that our event that we're going to do on December 2nd might be the last one. Not sure? Check out the website. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for this podcast comes from Adult Study Hall by ADHD reWired at adultstudyhall.com. Adult Study Hall is the ADHD-friendly co-working community for adults with ADHD, just like you and just like me. Harness the power of shame-free and judgment-free real-time accountability at adultstudyhall.com, next to other adults with ADHD who just get it. Membership to Adult Study Hall is only $19.99 a month and is free for the first week. When you become a member, you'll gain access to our on-demand drop-in room called Ash 24/7. That's available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter what time zone it's in, Ash 24/7 will be there for you. If you're looking for more structure, membership also includes our facilitated session, part of our weekly ASH Plus events. Find your focus by joining ASH Plus sessions, where we cover themes like cleaning and decluttering, taskbuster sessions for those dreaded to-dos, workout sessions, and job and career accelerator sessions. We have a Write With Me session and more. And we have more ASH Plus sessions in the works as we speak. And this week, I'm hosting a 2-hour Pomodoro dance party where we're going to work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break by dancing and then back to work for another 25 minutes. We will do 4 25-minute work cycles with dance breaks in between. So come get your dance on. Go to adultstudyhall.com to learn more about our current ASH Plus events. We'd love it if you joined us. You might even catch Will Kerb of Hacking Your ADHD, or reWired coaches Moira Mabin and Roxy Martin, or MJ Siemens, the host of ADHD Diversified, or the wonderful Barb in our ASH 24/7 drop-in room. Go to adultstudyhall.com to get signed up. You can try it free for the first week, then it's only $19.99 a month after that. So grab your to-dos and join the ADHD-friendly virtual co-working community built just for us. It does make a difference when you're working with people who just get it. That's adultstudyhall.com. We'll see you there.
And we're back.
All right. Thank you, MJ. All right, Barb, what is our next question?
The next question is from Erica. She said she's been on antidepressants for over 10 years and finally figuring out my depression anxiety was a result of undiagnosed ADHD. And she's currently 51 and female. Do any of you have the experience of getting off the SSRIs and learning to feel out what normal is? And she also mentioned she does have psychiatric guidance with this.
Okay, that is good.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, that your age demographic is like the top age demographic who is being diagnosed with ADHD, and what you just described is kind of like textbook for women your age. So I'm not sure what SSRI you are on, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing this with a doctor. I do know that it is highly not recommended to just stop. That can really mess up your serotonin levels and really cause a lot of challenges. So one thing to sort of look at is with ADHD, we often experience coexisting disorders. Anxiety and depression often go along with ADHD. And so it sounds like you've been on it for a while. It sounds like you are wondering what is the ADHD, what might be underlying anxiety and depression. But I totally get it. Like, I mean, it makes sense if you have a recent ADHD diagnosis. Like, is it ADHD? Is the anxiety and depression even actually a thing I'm experiencing? Or is it just from not having managed ADHD? So I would say explore it slowly. But if you start to feel anxious and depressed again, that's why you work with a doctor to do this. Because, it's really common for people to say, oh, I want to get off my antidepressant medication because I'm feeling great. Well, often there's a reason you're feeling great, and it may be because of the medication. So, but it may be worth giving that a try under doctor's guidance. Moira?
So in a similar boat, and also because, it's very common for women to be either misdiagnosed or mistreated for anxiety and depression. One of the things complicating at our age is that we're also going through a menopause transition, which also impacts our hormones that could be related to mood. So the recommendations that I have also been told is do it when your life is boring, when, things are stable and going well, trying it in good weather, like things that might help you know to differentiate. And then the other piece is sometimes what is perceived as mood disorder may actually have to do more with your ADHD, whether or not it's treated for some of the emotional regulation pieces. So looking at, like, I noticed that you said you're on Wellbutrin, and that's sort of like there's non-stimulants that can assist with some of the things that may be ADHD related that may not be mood disorder. So, but yeah, going slowly and talking to your prescriber. One of the things that was extremely helpful for me in getting to know my cycle was actually, and my ADHD symptoms, was doing a weekly checklist of my symptoms, because then I was able to be more aware of how I was feeling and what was going on for me. I have tried it. My life wasn't stable enough or boring enough yet. And then there was too many other changing factors that I've decided to stay on it for now. But I have that same question still myself.
All right. Thanks for that question. What's our next question?
Actually, Jim has a question.
Excellent. Hi, Eric. Hi, everybody else. First off, thank you for all the work you do. It's very helpful. So yeah, I'm fairly new to my ADHD journey, and I figured the best thing to do early on is focus my attention, and we can all appreciate the irony there, on my biggest issues first. And I feel that my biggest issue is with mind wandering. So I wondered if the panel had any experience or advice regarding mind wandering. It's so pervasive, and I feel it's holding back my learning, because just particularly trying to read or listen, even like podcasts, I have intellectually at least very real interest, but it doesn't seem to be enough to hold me with my attention. And I just drift off into having conversations with myself in my head or playing out some scenario like a movie. And it's a real problem.
So I have this very vivid memory. It was probably about 8 years ago. I was getting ready to watch I was getting ready to turn the lights off because I wanted to watch a show. And then I went to turn the lights off, which then I saw something on my counter. And then I started doing basically a project in the kitchen. That led me to like 5 other like tangential rabbit holes. And then I just sort of like caught myself in the moment of like recognizing what I had just done. Then I sat down to write a blog post called "Is ADHD Really Mind Wandering Syndrome?" And then I found that Russell Barkley had written something about mind wandering syndrome, and I never even heard that term before. So I was like, oh, this is probably actually a thing. So I have often thought of, at least for my own ADHD, as it's sort of like you're in the car on the old school radios and you can push the scan button, and every like 5 to 7 seconds it goes to the next available station. I feel sometimes my brain gets like stuck in the scan mode, or it's like when you just want to listen to the one station. So the things that I have found to be most helpful, one is medication. Do you currently take medication for ADHD?
No, I'm still awaiting my assessment actually next month.
That would be great, especially if you find some medication that can work for you. I know when the first time I took medication, it was just one of those like, holy shit moments. Like, I can have just one thought. That's amazing. Right? Because usually it was, especially when reading was a nightmare for me before I started taking medication. Like, it would literally, by like the first paragraph, I was already triggered 5 thoughts like on and having like 10 different ideas. And then those just keep expanding exponentially. And I would get to the end of whatever I was reading. I have no idea what I just read. Right? Medication helped profoundly. The other thing that really has helped is mindfulness-based meditation, because with that, you train your brain to catch yourself when you wander, right? And I don't know if you have any experience with meditation, Jim, but mindfulness meditation, it doesn't mean you have to clear your mind by any means. It means just notice your mind and do so without judgment. So you have a certain focal point. It's often the breath. And so every time your mind goes somewhere else and you catch it, you're practicing mindfulness, right? What I have found, especially when I'm in a really good meditation sort of routine, is that I catch those like about to wander somewhere else much more readily. And the staying with what I'm working on is much easier because I'm just more aware of it. And I think that's one of the real values of mindfulness. It really does train your brain to stick with a specific focal point. And I do believe that everyone with ADHD can meditate. And it doesn't need to be sitting down, just breathing. You can do it while walking or eating or even listening to music. There are so many ways to experience mindfulness-based meditation that taps into a lot of the sort of the sensory channels of the mind. And I think that is just, it's huge. And I would probably start with a guided meditation, especially if you're a mind wanderer, because it sort of gives you, it's like you're kind of the dog and the meditation is the rabbit, right? It gives you something to follow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have been practicing mindfulness meditation. I started with that before I
Nice.
discovered the ADHD. In fact, just when I was trying to find practices to kind of calm my emotional reaction to things and just sort of deal with my focus and just sort of improve. As I say, mainly being emotionally reactive to things was sort of the biggest issue at the time. So I was trying to just sort of calm myself, develop the ability to take a pause and respond rather than reacting.
Okay.
So yeah, I've done a fair bit of mindfulness and meditation. I'd be lying if I said that I stuck to the practice regularly.
I'm with you there. I'm an on again, off again meditator, and probably will be for life. It's like the way my relationship with meditation is. I actually don't love doing it, but I love how I feel when I'm doing it. I love the impacts that it has.
Right.
Will, what are your thoughts on this one?
So I did a lot of research on mind wandering for an episode a while back. So it has to do with the default mode network and how normally that turns off when we're doing task-oriented work, but that's not the relationship with the ADHD brain.
Yeah.
And one of the ways you can help quiet it is actually giving yourself specific times that you do let yourself mind wander. It's like go on a walk and just be like, hey, I'm just going to let my brain make all those associations, because this is all our divergent thinking, jumping from one topic to the next and finding connections that we don't do. And if we let our brain do that, it's a happy brain, because otherwise it just tries to do it all the time.
That's great. I love that. I love when I'm leading a meditation and I give people permission to allow their minds to wander, how it tends to help them focus on their breath, which I just love the irony of it. Brendan?
One of the things that I do when I lead mindfulness stuff is I talk about how, and I stole this from my sensei, it's sort of like what you're saying, like just ride the noise, right? Like if you imagine you're standing in the ocean and some people stand there and they try to resist the waves coming through and you're going to be like the mountain does not move kind of guy. Like that's one way to meditate, but you can also just sort of let the waves move you, like let the thoughts and the noises outside and all that stuff kind of bump into you, and you notice them at first, but eventually you can sort of rise to the surface of that stuff and sort of ride along the waves of whatever's drifting through your mind. It all depends on what you need your brain to do. And I love that Will brought up the default mode network, because yay.
Yay science.
Yeah, no, that stuff's awesome. And the other piece, that something that I do personally is when I find that I'm like, my mind is all over the place, I will read or listen to a podcast or sometimes color, but I don't remember to do that one often enough. And my objective is to do deep work, right? Like I'm going to read this book, I'm going to listen to this podcast, I'm going to color this picture. It's intended to be deep work. I'm trying to keep my mind, kind of on what I'm doing, but it's never anything of consequence. I'm not reading a book where I'm going to like have to know what it said. I'm not listening to a podcast where I want to like analyze it for my better podcast work or something. It's just sort of like my job is to try to keep my focus on the thing for longer than I did before. And when I get distracted and a thought comes through, that's okay. I notice it and then I come back. It's sort of like I'm mindfully reading, mindfully coloring, mindfully listening to a podcast. So that might be, if you need something to do, like if mindfulness feels like you're not doing something and you need something to do, that might be a way to bring mindfulness into a task that feels more dewy.
I think that's great. All right. What is our next question?
Our next question is from Rochelle.
Hey, Rochelle, what's going on?
Hey, so I just wanted to know if you all have any tips on how to care for pets, especially cats with ADHD, because I keep forgetting to do things that they really need me to do.
Just for clarification, you're talking about what do you do with ADHD versus your cat having ADHD?
Yes, me.
Okay. All right. Just I'm like, I didn't know anyone who was diagnosing cats with ADHD. So I thought it was dogs that have ADHD. Okay. So, I actually love this question because I don't think we've ever been asked this question before. I'm going to defer to the pet owners here. MJ has pets and she's hiding, so I want to call on her.
So we have a cat and we have a dog. I wish my partner were here to answer this because he also has ADHD and he is great at taking care of the pets. For us, what helps us is routine. I know that I've heard a lot of people say like cleaning the cat litter box sucks, and it does. but we consistently do it every single night because it's part of our evening routine. It's like integrated in our bedtime routine. So we have like a cat room where she can just hang out, and on the way going to bed, we stop at that room first and take care of the litter box first before we take care of ourselves.
So I like that you have the litter box sort of on the way to the bedroom versus like, 'cause I know a lot of people keep it like in the basement, which is like not on the way to anywhere. So it's like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, it's I guess it's sort of akin to, if anybody has read Atomic Habits from James Clear, it's sort of that habit stacking is put everything, what helps me anyway is to put things in a sequential order, I guess. Like the cues that we were talking about earlier is if we live in a 4-level split. So if I'm going from upstairs to downstairs, I want to make sure that my routine is based on the stops on the way down. So whether it's pet care or you care or anything, having it so that it makes sense so that you don't have to wander back and forth will make things a lot easier. So if we're taking the dog for a walk, the harness is right next to the kitchen in the dining room because the dog always comes up. She has her own routine. And then she gets the harness on, we go down, the leash is already downstairs with doggy bags next to the mudroom. So everything is just sort of there. So on the way up, take care of the cat stuff. On the way down, to take care of the dog stuff.
I've seen some really cool like automated gadgets for like cleaning kitty litter stuff. I don't know how well those things work. But Rochelle, what are some of your like biggest challenges with it?
The litter box, definitely. Just like remembering to scoop it, because we have 2, and they're in 2 different places and they're not really on the way to anywhere, but we really don't have space to move them until we move.
Wait, they're in 2 different places. Is there a reason for that?
Because we don't have room for both of them in the same place.
They won't share?
They both use both of the boxes, but I forget to scoop the boxes.
What would happen if you just rent to one litter box?
Cats like to have multiple litter boxes. And if I have 2 cats, I'm actually supposed to have 3 litter boxes, but 2 is what we can fit. So they get 2.
Wow.
I never knew that.
Did not know that.
Now, they said they like that. Do they need that?
I think my cats do, because if they had one, I think that they would fight. They have very different litter habits.
All right. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Alexa reminders. If you have an Alexa, just like, this is your reminder, feed the cat. This is your reminder, clean the litter box. This is your reminder.
And I can make them.
Why do you own one? I mean, no, I'm sorry.
Make them. No, but make them fun. Like, yeah, I agree with the last statement because dogs are better. But you can say like things about, instead of like get a drink of water, it'd be like, have a drink. It's refreshing. You'll like it on your Alexa. But I also have, for my dog, I have so my husband usually feeds her and he travels for work. So on the weeks that he's away, I have feed dog on my calendar as a daily activity with an alert. And the same thing with like going to the vet. And we have a dog that has to get groomed. So I book all of those appointments in advance. So I only have to use the executive function, a couple times a year to figure out that sort of stuff.
Awesome. And Rochelle, I know that you are often in adult study hall. You could also make part of your going into adult study hall routine part of you clean the litter boxes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Now that we all know you need to clean those litter boxes, I'm hoping that all of our adult study hall people will, when they see Rochelle in the adult study hall, say, "How's your litter box?" Oh, now you're screwed. You're going to be asked this by so many people.
No, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I see Rochelle a lot. This is Barb, Rochelle. Yeah. So I'd be happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that question. I loved it. All right. Let's take a really quick break. We're getting short on time. And when we come back, we will we'll answer as many questions as we can with the time that we have remaining. And we'll get a dad joke. We will be right back. If you like the content you hear here and want to check out some more great ADHD podcasts, go to ADHD-rewired.com/podcast network, where you can check out all of our other shows. And if you want to hang out with us and pick our brains, you can. Every second Tuesday of the month, we host a live Q&A where you can bring your ADHD-related questions and might even be able to ask them on the show. And while you're hearing last month's live Q&A today, if you are new to this podcast, we want you to know that we almost always release the live Q&A from last month the same day of our Q&A. So just so you know that this week is actually an exception since we actually did our live Q&A last week. So mark your calendars so you can chat with me and Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials, Will from Hacking Your ADHD, MJ from ADHD Diversified, ADHD reWired coach Moira from the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle, and ADHD reWired coach Roxy Martin from our upcoming podcast with Will called Wait, What Was the Question? And of course, my assistant and ADHD reWired's fantastic community manager, Barb. That's every second Tuesday of the month. Register to join us on Zoom by going to ADHD-rewired.com/events. We do stream the live Q&A on Facebook too, but the best way to interact with us during the Q&A and with other listeners is live on Zoom. Our next live Q&A is on Tuesday, December 14th, where you can join us and ask your ADHD-related questions. Head on over to ADHD-rewired.com/events to register. We really do appreciate every single one of you for listening, sharing, and subscribing to all of our shows. We do hope that our shows and our stories help you feel a little more seen, heard, and understood. And most of all, we hope you know that you are not alone in your ADHD experiences. If this show or any of our shows has done that for you, please leave us a rating and review, because doing so helps our show get in front of more earballs. And it also fills up our little podcast buckets too. So please leave us a rating and review. Thank you so much. You can discover more about all of our podcasts and RSVP for our monthly live Q&A every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern by going to ADHD-rewired.com. Thanks for listening. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons over at ADHD-rewired.com/Patreon. It's also where you can go to get ad-free episodes of this show when you become a patron starting at just $5 a month. Or for $10 a month, get ad-free episodes and hear the audio from our monthly coaching sessions that our $25 a month patrons can join. And the ad-free episodes and the monthly bonus recording of an actual coaching call will appear right on your podcast app, which you first do have to set up on our Patreon page. We just want to thank all of our patrons who have continued to give over at ADHD-rewired.com/Patreon. Thank you so much. And members at $25 a month can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for a group coaching call on Zoom. Our next Patreon-only group coaching call is on Tuesday, November 23rd at 3 p.m. Central. That's Tuesday, November 23rd at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join us but you aren't a patron yet, get signed up by going to ADHD-rewired.com/Patreon. No matter the contribution, I really am grateful for all of our patrons. We're growing and we're getting ready to bring on another administrative person, so your help makes that happen. Speaking of support, I still am sitting on that same desk chair since college, and it's time to change it up. I'm a little bit indecisive as well on the chair front, so if you can support me on Patreon, I will make that commitment to replace this chair so you can know that your support is actually providing me with better support. If you love being a part of this community and love the show, and if you're in a position where you are able to support us on Patreon, we would really, really appreciate your support. Consider joining us at ADHD-rewired.com/Patreon and become a patron today. Remember, perks start at just $5 a month, and support can start at any amount that works for you. That's ADHD-rewired.com/Patreon. Thank you so much.
And we're back for another Q&A episode of ADHD Rewired.
Thanks, Brendan. All right. That was so cheesy. What's our next question?
Next question comes from Maya. She asks, do you have suggestions for working through shame and disappointment? I'm getting diagnosed at 29 and working through a lot of that right now, both work and life related.
I love this topic because I love shame as a topic, not like to use it in any way. And the reason I love it because of how life-changing it is when he understands sort of what causes it, what exacerbates it, what minimizes it, and what can heal it. And a lot of this stuff comes directly from Brene Brown's research. And, it's shame is, I think, really rooted in that fear that we are not good enough, that we have not done enough, that we are just not enough in whatever domain it is. And then keeping it hidden and secret and, judging ourselves. And when we realize that we are not alone in whatever it is that we are struggling with, and we share that stuff with other people, and those other people can respond with empathy, that's the stuff that really can reduce shame. Roxy?
I really appreciate this question. And the first thought when I read through it was just wanting to know if you've had the time to just really grieve it all, first and foremost, because it is a lot. And so that would be, if you haven't, that would be my first thought, is just to, it might sound silly, but literally like schedule time to just feel the feels and grieve some of the losses. And the next thought I have is pretty much what Eric said, just to know that the antidote is to bring it into the light. So in those places where you are feeling the shame, I would say to bring somebody you trust into the process and talk it all through. I know for me, as an undiagnosed mom, I had a lot of shame around the way that I was parenting my first daughter. And she's an adult now, and it still comes to mind sometimes. I wish that I knew, I wish I knew things that I didn't know. But it was really helpful when I did know, to be able to talk to somebody and go, oh man, I hate that I did this thing. I hate that I didn't want to take her to the park, and that I would rather just hold up and watch Oprah in my living room. But as I could talk about it, I could say, but I get it now. Like, I didn't have the ability to motivate myself to do some of these things. And so I could separate it out and go, I'm not a shit mom. I had a thing that I didn't understand. And honestly, at 55, there are places in me where I'm still going back and forgiving myself for what I didn't know. So as I'm able to do that, say it out loud, talk to other people, it's helpful. So that's what I got on that.
Thanks, Roxy. Brendan?
ADHD is life on hard mode, right? So that helps me personally navigate a lot of the shame that comes with ADHD, because I'm often going, why can't I just do this like a neurotypical person does it? I'm like, oh, it's because I have ADHD, right? And I've done the asthma thing before, where I'm not too lazy and unmotivated to breathe. I have asthma. I don't need to feel shame when I can't breathe. I also have ADHD. So theoretically, I shouldn't have to feel shame when I double book myself or forget an appointment or something like that. And I also want to point out, and y'all knew it was coming, right? Like, there's got to be a drinking game based around this by now.
Should we say it together?
That
we are
living through a global pandemic. Right? And some of what's happening with your shame, I'm willing to bet, is you're comparing yourself now to how you think you should have been able to perform in 2018. And it's not 2018. All of us are having more challenges, neurotypical and neurodiverse folks alike, because we are living through a global pandemic. It's not over. We're trying to convince ourselves that it's over because kids are back to school full time. And that apparently means the pandemic is over, which is silly. But I know I fall into that pit just like everyone else does. We're still living through this unprecedented international global event. And so give yourself some wiggle room for that too, right? Like, if we can give ourselves some wiggle room, we can wiggle around some of that shame. Maybe not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah. And, in our alumni sessions for our coaching community, every couple months we'll do a session we're calling Shame Gremlins, where we just give people opportunities just to share something they're like sitting on and holding on to and they're feeling really crappy about. And it's really healing. So like, find your community and share the stuff that you're struggling with. MJ?
Yeah, I just really want to emphasize the point of, if you are going to expose those shame gremlins, like, absolutely make sure that it's with people that you trust. Yes. I know that that's been said a couple times already, but for me, and I imagine for a lot of people, if you're sharing that shame with somebody who you thought you trusted and all of a sudden it goes sideways, then you really got to look for somebody who you just know is just going to empathize with you and understand you.
Yeah.
And even if they may not really know what you're going through, as long as they're not shaming you themselves, we already carry enough shame on our own. We're good at that. I'm really good at that anyway. So yeah, just if I didn't have the people that I trust to share my shame gremlins with, I would be a mess. So find the people that you trust and you can share it with.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. Will?
Also, after you share your shame, make sure you have time to let yourself process that, because even
Yes.
though it doesn't feel worse, that whole emotional unburdening is an exhausting process.
Mhm.
So give yourself some time to process and recover from doing that.
Yeah, and I always loved Brene Brown's phrase, the vulnerability hangover. It is, it's like when you share something really like hard for you to share, like sometimes I can feel you'll just feel really raw, and it's but I'm telling you, it like being able to know how to move through shame in a healthy, productive way can truly become kind of like a superpower, because I think the essence of being able to do that well makes it where failure like is just an event. To quote Zig Ziglar, failure is just an event. It's not a person. So keep that in mind. All right, we're about at the hour mark here. I'm going to see if we can speed through these questions real quick here. So Kathy asked, the diagnosis, the meds help with energy and focus, but when my ADHD kids melt down, it sends my anxiety through the ceiling. Any suggestions? Um, Tall bottle of wine. No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. Um, uh, so I definitely relate with the experiencing the anxiety when your kid's melting down. So it's breathe, lots of breathing. I don't know all the situations in which your kid sort of melts, but I know that one of the things that I had to work on was with the morning sort of routine. And if I was having to rush my son to get out the door in the morning, that was on me because I did not give enough time. So yeah, that's a quick response to that. Brendan, can you do it in like 20 seconds? Give us your like bumper sticker.
Circling back to what if you're not the main character? It's about your kid and helping them get through this spike. It's not about how upset you are that they're spiking. So we kind of have to rein in our emotional response to that as best we can. I'm not pretending it's easy,
Mhm.
but trying to take that perspective of it's about them having a hard time, not about them giving you a hard time, will help you get further.
Okay, next question. Let's see. How do I get my wife to understand that ADHD is real and that she must embrace this in order to support me? You can't have this. Everyone has a bit of ADHD mindset. It is an invisible disability. Oh, first of all, I'm sorry that you experienced that, because that's so hard, that invalidation of your experience. I'm assuming your wife didn't go to medical school, so it might be helpful to provide some science based information. You might want to the person that I referred to earlier, Melissa Orlov, find some of her stuff to share it with your partner. And yeah, I mean that's super super challenging because it requires some counseling. And if you do go to marital counseling, find someone who specializes in ADHD. I can't emphasize that enough, especially for marriage counseling. Because if you have someone who doesn't get ADHD, you better believe that the person with ADHD is going to be blamed for not carrying their weight versus being more empathetic and understanding. Okay, we're going fast here. See, I am 70 and finally have gotten the ADHD diagnosis. The shame I am filled with is remembering how my parents treated me as a child. Now family has put me to the side. It has been grand learning the truth, but dot dot dot.
Can I just
Uh
quickly?
huh.
So we know that ADHD is highly genetic, and a lot of us, especially if we're late diagnosed, can look back and how our parents did things. Without knowing anything else, I encourage this person to perhaps consider who else in her family, or I don't know if it's a him or her, sorry, has ADHD, because they may be, sounds like they might be slightly estranged from their family, but they're not alone, and they have us. And congratulations for getting diagnosed at 70. That
Right.
is awesome.
it is never too late. And it is never too late to work on self and to find meaning and to grow. Like, I think that as soon as we, the moment we think that we can no longer grow is the moment we really begin to die. All right. We do have our moment of dad with Will Curb, host of Hacking Your ADHD. Take it away, Will.
Well, it's been, weather's been getting colder and my office is getting pretty cold, but fortunately in the corner, it's 90 degrees.
Oh, God.
Oh,
Oh, that was a painfully bad
Do you
one.
have that wah, wah, wah?
I love it.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you to all of our panelists. Please make sure you click subscribe on the podcast. Check out all of our other podcasts here on the ADHD reWired Podcast Network. And we do this every second Tuesday of the month, same time, same place. Thank you for being part of this wonderful community. And we will see you all back here next month. Bye, everybody. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHD-rewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD reWired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHD-rewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD reWired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHD-rewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all of the shows on the ADHD reWired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD reWired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD reWired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tibbers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.